situation keeps getting crazier as we have multiple updates on the Toronto Maple Leafs and what they're planning to do with both Calle, Jarnkrok, and David Kampf, going out and getting a top 6 forward because it's going to happen this month. And what's the plan for Nick Robertson? We're going to break it all down in this live stream. And welcome in, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great summer. We're definitely in the dog days of summer right now. Things are very quiet around the league, but not so quiet with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've made a couple signings. We're going to break those down, including Nick Robertson. And, of course, what they're going to do, because they need a top 6 player. This roster is incomplete. We all know it's true. And, let's break down. Let's talk about it. Let's talk it out because, we got a couple weeks here where I think the Leafs are going to be very active heading into September because a lot of people tend to forget, the preseason still pretty long. It's starting soon. So you got to get that player. And Elliotte Friedman came out. We're going to have a video on this tomorrow as well. Elliotte Friedman came out and said that the Leafs are going to be active. They're going to be making moves before the puck drops on the first game of the season. Now, what does that mean exactly? Not so sure. But let's take a look at what they've done so far. And Bradshaw Living has been pretty busy since the start of this offseason when they were first eliminated. Obviously, we know that they solidified their third line center position in Nicolas Roy. Matthias Maccelli, who I'm very high on. I'm very excited. Same with Dakota Joshua. Henry Thrun, I think, is an interesting option. Probably won't see too much NHL time. And then we know the rest. Michael Pezzetta probably will get into games. Travis Boyd's an interesting one. Will probably be with the Marlies, but we'll see about that. I see some people saying Mason McTavish. That's an option too if you want John Tavares to move to the wing. I think Mason McTavish is a faster player. He could play the center position. That's pretty interesting. Shout out to some regulars I see in the chat. Eric, as well as Joshua. Welcome in, everybody. And again, we'll be live here for about half an hour to an hour. We'll see where the conversation takes us. And Leafs have strong interest in Brian Rust. Totally agree with that, but unfortunately, you're going to have to make a deal with the devil with Kyle Dubas over there in Pittsburgh, and you know exactly what he wants in return, and that is a lot. To get back to this, we know what was going out the door. That is Mitch Marner, Pontus Holmberg, Ryan Reeves, Alex Steves, Matt Murray, and a couple others as well. And obviously, we know Mitch Marner is probably the biggest loss in all of those, right? When you look at the out list, I mean, Nick Abruzzese was not moving the needle for me. Alex Steves, a lot of people are complaining about him, the fact that they let him walk. If he was going to be an everyday NHLer, he would have been by now. Let's be honest about it, right? He showed some flashes of some some good minutes there, but let's be honest, like if he was going to be an everyday NHLer, he would have been last year. Ryan Reeves, of course, we know the story, that's all good. Re-signed John Tavares, Matthew Knies contract. Every day I think about it, it gets better and better. And Nick Robertson is returning, and Nick Robertson is a guy I wanted to talk about on stream here and get everyone's opinions. Let's get some yes and no's in the chat right now. Yes or no? Would you hang on to, would you keep Nick Robertson? Because this is an interesting one. It's a 1-year deal that they signed him to, again, similarly to last offseason when he did kind of request a trade. I feel like some of that's gotten lost over the last year or so. He kind of requested a trade, but he just wanted a bigger role. He wanted a different role. He wasn't happy with Sheldon Keefe's deployment. And obviously, I think he was, he had a pretty decent year last year, similar year in terms of point production to the year before that. Obviously, the year before that was a little bit better. I'm sure we're going to get some split decisions here. So no, yes. And Joe, I would argue that they did give Steves a chance in the preseason, and a lot of these guys never rose above the occasion and never made the team. So I would argue that, although I could see, that some people think that he wasn't given a shot. He played well with the Marlies. And I don't think he was ever going to be a top player with the Leafs. Maybe a third liner, but didn't really see it. We'll see what he does with the Bruins. I'm sure he's going to get lots of opportunity to play there because they have nobody on that team. But the Leafs could have pushed for 2 years in arbitration on that deal to keep more control, but leaning towards a higher AAV on a 1-year deal gives Robertson another chance to bet on himself, first of all. And I think in signing him, having him signed versus not signed, makes him more attractive as a trade chip around the league. So obviously, Elliotte Friedman, and we covered this yesterday, kicking tires on maybe Kyle Dubas wants him in Pittsburgh. I think that Nick Robertson actually makes a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Penguins to put him alongside Sidney Crosby. You get that playmaker with that sniper, obviously, and Crosby, can still score some goals. He scored over 30 goals with 33 last season, but I think that he makes a lot of sense in Pittsburgh in terms of the fit. I don't know if he fits in terms of his skill set in Toronto. He should be a top line player, but I don't know if that's the answer in Toronto. So We'll see what happens with that. There's also been chatter, and we had a video earlier today about Igor Chinnikov, who requested a trade out of Columbus. He is a better player in terms of point production. He's half a point a game player. Did have some back issues last year. We can take a look at, how their stats kind of match up against each other. Chinnikov, like I mentioned, half a point a game player, 15 points last year in 30 games, and he played on average 3 minutes more than Nick Robertson last season. If you take a look at Robertson last year, 69 games played, 22 points, which was a dip in production from 2 seasons ago under Sheldon Keefe in 23-24. But again, only averages 12 minutes of ice time a night. Doesn't play in every game. I was actually surprised looking back at a lot of the stats that he actually played in 69 games last year. Kind of forgot about that, but again, mostly on the third line, all of those things. He's still relatively young too. We tend to forget, like, he's not even 24 yet. Obviously going to be 24 at the start of this season coming up, but pretty interesting swap there if that were to happen. But again, I would stay away from players with a history of back issues. And the fact that, he actually makes wrong button there, $2.1 million against the cap, and Robertson makes $1.8 million at this point. So I could still see, and I saw a lot of people saying no and yes to keeping Nick Robertson. I could see a world where he stays with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They want to hang on to him. I could absolutely see that. But, how does everyone feel about that? Yes, no, let's get some more answers in the chat here. But we will see what they end up doing with Nick Robertson. I think the only reason they would trade Nick Robertson at this point is if nobody's interested in Calle, Jarnkrok and David Kampf, because those are the two guys you got to look at moving. That is what's next on the docket for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, you can see here, there was some chatter, the last couple of days about Jarnkrok for Robertson. Leafs have made some signings. We can kind of get into that now. Villeneuve, thought that was very good as well. I think they value this guy a lot higher than people realize within the organization. I feel like they think that he's going to be a bottom pair defenseman at some point. I'm not saying it's this year or even next year, but the fact of the matter is OEL is not getting any younger. Kristanev's not getting any younger. Yes, you have Ben Danford coming through the system, but you're going to need other guys to kind of fill that role as time goes on. And obviously, I think they feel like William Villeneuve is that guy. And interesting thing to me is, how does your game translate from the OHL to the NHL? And not even just the NHL, the AHL. It doesn't always work out that way. You might have to reinvent yourself. He hasn't done that. His game has translated to the pro level, so I wonder if it will to the NHL. I'm excited to see what he does in pre-season. There's a couple other updates as well, but let's wrap up with a bow. Some of the signings. They got some other signings done in terms of RFAs. Nothing crazy, but what does everyone think of Villeneuve? Is he going to play a role for the Toronto Maple Leafs even this season? Would you trade Nick Robertson, let's say, for a Brian Rust? Would you do that if it was like Nick Robertson, Dennis Hildeby plus for a package with Brian Rust? You would have to free up some more salary cap space to make that work, of course, in Calle, Jarnkrok and David Kampf. But how do we feel about that? I think might be a hot take from Darren, and I'm going to get into some comments now as well, because you guys have been very active in the chat, but could be a hot take from Darren. I think Thrun might take Benoit's job. Now, we are members of the Benoit train here on the channel. Everybody knows. Watch your ears, everybody. The Benoit train came and it left. It has left the station. So I'm hoping that everyone jumped on when you could. We're big members of the Benoit fan club here, but I think it's going to be interesting. I think you'd like to think a lot of these spots are solidified heading into the year, but nobody's really is. So we'll see what happens once preseason gets underway. Thrun, I think, could actually surprise a lot of people. He's probably going to be on the Marlies, let's be honest. But the one thing I think was interesting in that move is you get to bury a lot of his salary in the Marlies, if he is going to the Marlies. And if there are some injuries, you can call up a guy who is young, hungry to make an impact, and has NHL experience. I thought that trade was to get anything back for Ryan Reeves. All due respect to Ryan Reeves. I hope he hits the 1,000 game mark, all of that stuff. That's an insane return for that player. So I think that made all the sense in the world. And yeah, Benoit's the GOAT. I love Benoit. I think he's going to be great again this year, I think. So he really took his game to a new level in the playoffs, which was cool. And I hope that he continues to do that heading into next year, because we saw some some crazy offensive output out of him, which was pretty cool. And not just that shot that won the game. I just mean he was rushing the puck up, really uncharacteristic for Benoit. So really love that stuff. But Rielly's not being traded. I want to get into Morgan Rielly in a little bit as well. So stay tuned for that, because I think that was a, interesting talking point last year. Now, Eric has some interesting lines to go over. Shout out Anthony. Thank you. Shout out to Leafs Digest. Eric has Nyes, Matthews, Michelli, which I could agree with. Roslovic. I'm just saying it's odd that he hasn't signed yet. We're going to have a video on that as well. It's odd that he hasn't signed yet. I don't think he's a top 6 player, but it's odd. Roslovic, Tavares, Nylander. Wouldn't hate that either. Joshua, Waugh, McMahon. I'm in love with that. And Domi, Lorentz, Lawton, and maybe McMahon, depending on the lines. Domi, I think, has to play higher in the lineup. I do wonder about, I wonder if McMahon's a 4th liner now, which is that's not even a bad thing. But I do wonder if McMahon is a 4th liner now, and you go with Dakota Joshua, Nicolas Waugh, and Max Domi. That could be a hard line to play against. That could create some havoc. Not just that, that is a physical line that can score. Perfect. That's what we've been looking for. So I like what Treliving's done with the team in terms of goaltending, defense, and the bottom 6 at this point. He had his hands kind of tied the last 2 years or so, I guess, in terms of what he could do with the money that was available. I really like what he's done with all of that. But I think that you still need a top 6 player. You need a Brian Rust, something like that. From Profit, Darius, who would you prefer most? Troy Terry, Nazem Kadri, Jared McCann, or Owen Tippett? So you have to look at some of the cap hits. Troy Terry makes a lot of money, but I think he's a perfect fit for either line, either of the first 2 lines on this team. He's another playmaker. But the thing is, keep in mind, not the most physical player can play physically. Nylander can play physically in the playoffs, right? But it doesn't always play that way. So, and even in the playoffs, he doesn't always play that way. But I think that, Terry's an interesting option, makes a lot of money. Nazem Kadri, a little bit on the older side. He's a center. I don't know if he fits into this lineup. Doesn't make much sense. We know that the Calgary Flames don't want to trade with Brad Treliving because they're petty like that. So I don't see that happening. I like Jared McCann because he plays the wing very well. He can also play center. I don't necessarily like players that can play both, because to me, it sounds like you're not the greatest at either, if that makes sense. So don't necessarily like that, but he plays the wing well and can put up a lot of points, and he only makes $5 million. So that makes a lot of sense. And then there's Owen Tippett. To me, around the league, if you're looking around the league with what the Leafs will have available to them in cap space when the time is right, when they eventually move off David Kampf and Calle Jarnkrok, to me, it's Owen Tippett, Jared McCann, and Brian Rust. I mean, you can also take a look at Rickard Rakell, but to me, Rickard Rakell is a guy that put up the most points he ever has last season. He was playing a lot of the time with Sidney Crosby. So you could put him on a line with William Nylander maybe, although they play the same wing. It could make some sense beside Austin Matthews. But I'm not totally in love with the Rickard Rakell fit. I think that Brian Rust actually fits this team quite well, but I am scared about initiating a trade with Kyle Dubas. I think that could be pretty scary. But to me, it's Jared McCann, Owen Tippett. Tippett makes a little bit more, but you have to keep in mind he's younger. He can play with a physical edge. I watched him play in the OHL. He was the best player for the Mississauga Steelheads at the time. And pure goal scorer, underrated setup guy as well, playmaker as well. He can dish the puck and can play physically. He doesn't shy away from that stuff at all, which I think is really good. Makes a little bit more, just over $6 million, but I think that could be worth it as well. You can free up enough salary cap space to make that work if you really wanted to. So trade Morgan Rielly to Vancouver. That evens the Dakota Joshua trade. I don't think Morgan Rielly is going anywhere, and I'm not sure if that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing that he's staying in Toronto. I'll get to that in a little bit as well. In my lineup, McMahon is also a 4th liner. That is from Profit. I wonder about that now. I have to be honest. They have a collection of guys that, and I don't mean to disrespect any of the guys. They can all play those positions very well, but they have a collection of guys that I think can be 4th or 3rd liners, and they're going to have to figure it out in training camp. And I think that's fine. So Tippett, isn't great defensively, Profit. It's not that he's responsible defensively. I'll say it like that, but it's not like he is committed to defense. He's not like a defensive stalwart, any of that. But I would like to think that he's at least responsible, can chip the puck out, stuff like that, as a winger. So it could be an interesting option. But I think Brian Rust is, and Brian Rust has won a Stanley Cup, which is another thing. A little bit on the older side, but listen, you got a window here of 3 years. Let's get it done, I guess, right? But Paul saying, and shout out Paul, nice to see you tuning in. Kadri's too old now. I think the ship has sailed on the Kadri stuff. I thought it was heating up earlier this summer, but that has, I think that ship has sailed at this point. Eric says, if Rielly quarterbacks the power play, he will hit over 50 points this season. I tend to agree with that, and I think Rielly actually does have to quarterback the power play, because if you're making $7.5 million, you can't be a 5-on-5 only player. So, you know, the contract's going to look better if he's playing on the power play. It's just the fact of the matter, and I feel like he will. So, I mean, there's a possibility he doesn't, but I think that he will. So, let's see what else we got going on here, everybody. McTavish, I think that could be an interesting one too. We had McMahon, but not McMahon, sorry, excuse me, McCann, but kept Hall instead. I think it was also Kerfoot. Awful, awful moves there. Rielly had one bad season. I'm fine with giving him another return to form. Plus, he had a no trade clause. Let's get into Rielly for a second. Shout out Jose as well. Shout out Portugal. But let's get into Rielly a little bit, because I have his stats prepped here as well. When you take a step back and look at Rielly's season last year, half a point a game player. I know he makes $7.5 million, but look at where all the salaries are going at this point, where the salary cap is going. It's not bad value. Now, keep in mind that I'm talking about his points. I am talking about his points. This is a guy that plays almost on average 22 minutes a night and was horrific defensively last year. I'm not skipping over that part. But this is also a guy you have to keep in mind that has had tremendous upside in terms of offensive output season after season. He is better when he plays on the power play. He's going to put up more points on the power play. I would assume he's going to play on the power play next season, whether, you know, he can't take a slap shot or anything like that, but he'll sift them from the point. And he takes attention away from other guys sometimes when he has the puck, and, you know, some other guys can get freed up. And now Marner's gone too, so he's going to have to take on a bigger role a little bit. So, you know, when you look at all that, the biggest thing for me defensively with Morgan Rielly is this is the first time ever. This guy is 30 years old, by the way. 31, actually. First time ever as a Toronto Maple Leaf, he actually has a competent defense partner. And not even a competent defense partner, a defense partner that he can call his own. Oh, yes, this is my defense partner. Instead of, who is it tonight, coach? This is the first time ever. So I'm excited to see what him and Carlo, and I'm not blind to the fact that they weren't good at times last year, and obviously in the playoffs and all this stuff. But I feel like them starting together in training camp will be good for both of their chemistry. And listen, if it doesn't work, then you do change it up. But I think that McCabe and Tanev, and then right behind them you have Rielly and Carlo, and a full season of that, I feel like they will be better. And I feel like Morgan Rielly will bounce back. And I don't like to get into the personal lives too much of players, but he had a kid last year. We saw what that did to John Tavares. We saw what that did to Simone Benoit. That's all I'm going to say. Right? So at around the same times, they had terrible production. They looked, you know, they didn't look good in terms of the eye test. So I feel like he'll have a bounce back. First of all, he's going to put up more points, I think, because he's going to be playing more time on the power play. And defensively, I feel like playing and getting a solidified defense partner for him will do him a lot of good. And not just him. I think Brandon Carlo will be better to start the season as well. Brandon Carlo, like, talking about the personal lives of players, again, I don't like to get into it too much, but everything that we're talking about, how he was, you know, he didn't have a place to live, and then, like, he left his family behind when the trade happened, and that's difficult to deal with. And then, of course, you lock in for the playoffs, but, you know, I think that they'll have a better year. So that's just the way I feel about it. Let me know how you feel in the chat, but I feel like Morgan Rielly's actually going to have a bounce back here. I'm not too quick to trade him. Now, if he looks absolutely horrific next season and he puts up like 30 points, then we can have a conversation. Let's be honest about that. Then we'll have a conversation. But I think heading into next year, willing to give the guy a chance, and he was just horrible defensively in his own zone last year. But again, if you take a step back, you look at it, half a point a game player. He's going to be playing more time on the power play just by default because of the skill that's still there. He's going to find some success. So that will be very exciting to see. Paul with the $10 donation, super chat. First one of the summer. Thank you, Paul. What do you think of the Leafs getting a second line center? Tavares will be okay there for another year or two, but I don't see him lasting in that position. And you know what? I feel like we've been talking about Tavares not lasting in that position for 3 years at this point, and he's proven us all wrong. And John Tavares has never been the fastest guy. Even when he was 18, 19 years old, breaking in with the New York Islanders, he was never a fast player, but he's a really good player, but and responsible defensively and all these things. But it's a very fair question. I do think they have to start looking at it, and they have to start drafting for that as well, because I feel like they didn't necessarily do that in this year's draft. So they have to get a guy in the pipeline that will be ready to take that on a couple of years from now. But Tavares continues through his age to prove people wrong, and he's going to man that position for at least the next 2 years, I think, at this point, especially next year. But I think that they have to start thinking about it. I would seriously consider Mason McTavish. I think the return might be a little too steep than what the Leafs can afford at this point, because their draft picks and the cupboard, all of that is a little bit depleted. But at this point, you definitely have to start thinking about it at this point. Maybe you don't pull the trigger this year, but you have to start thinking about what does this look like heading into next season, the season after that. So I do think that again, I think you start looking at a guy like Mason McTavish. I just said not to pull the trigger this year. Maybe you do. So, if you take a look at McTavish and, the price isn't too high. Also heard that Jordan Kyrou, everyone's kind of kicking tires on him. He has a no movement clause that kicked in on July 1st, so it's a little bit more difficult to trade him if you're the St. Louis Blues. But I've heard that there's a couple destinations that he would waive his no trade clause to go to. I don't know if Toronto's on that list, and I don't know if he fits with Toronto. I don't know if that's a fit there. $8.1 million, 70, 80 point player. Could be an interesting fit, but I don't think he fits with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But and when I say he doesn't fit, I feel like he would fit in terms of they need a top 6 winger, but stylistically won't fit. He literally hates Craig Berube. Like, I just do not think there's any type of relationship there. That's really, I think, what caused Craig Berube's firing in St. Louis. So for those reasons, I don't think he fits. But in terms of like, hey, they need a top 6 forward, he's a top 6 forward, I could see how that would make sense. But if Kyrou's going anywhere, I would agree with Anthony. It's probably to Montreal, but I feel like that ship has probably sailed at this point too, because he has a no movement clause that just kicked in. So that'll be that. We need to not trade first for guys like Lawton anymore. I think Scott Lawton's going to be good this year. He's going to play a reduced role, but I could see some scoring in his future, but he's going to be playing less minutes, so we'll see what he does with that. He looked way more comfortable when we headed out of the Ottawa series into the Florida one for the first time as a Leaf. I also thought, and I brought this up a couple streams ago in some videos throughout the summer, for some reason, and let me know in the chat if you would agree with this. This is just something I picked up on. We've seen a lot of deadline pickups from the Leafs, whether they're UFAs or guys with term over the last couple of years, going back to when they started making the playoffs again in 2016-17. This is the first year to me that they acquired 2 guys, and both of them looked extremely uncomfortable the whole time. Until like maybe the end, where Lawton to me looked like he started to get a little bit more comfortable. I don't know if Mitch Marner was a distraction in the room, if that wasn't a distraction in the room for a bunch of the guys. Things were a little bit awkward. I'm not saying that was the reason, but I picked up on it this year that I feel like, the guys that they acquired at the trade deadline did not fit in as well. And I'm, remaining optimistic about it and that they will have good seasons next year. But I thought for some reason they came in and they looked very uncomfortable, and I didn't see that in previous years. So I did notice that this year at the trade deadline into the playoffs. I wonder if there was some distractions in the room. So he's valuable. Is he worth the first? That's what the market was, right? You have to consider that. Is he worth the first 5 years ago? Probably not, right? But and Lawton's just not going to score 20 goals though with the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? It's just you have to play a different style in the role that he's in. So not even play a different style. He's just not going to have the opportunity to do that. Like, can he score 20 goals on Philly's second line? Maybe. He's not going to be playing on the Toronto Maple Leafs second line, right? There could be some injuries. Maybe he moves around in the lineup, but I think now they envision him as their $1 million fourth line center. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think he makes the team deeper. So that's what it is. He's going to play that role for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And anything can happen in training camp. We've seen crazier things. Does Easton Cowan make the team? I don't know. Maybe. I feel like he has a better shot than some other rookies or younger players around the league. I have to be honest. So it would have to be on the third line, but that would really change things. If he were to make the team, what happens to Max Domi? What happens to Bobby McMahon? What happens to, you know what I mean? Like, there's a couple guys that, might be pushed out. But I think I'm just looking at it logically with the market. Is he worth a first-round pick? I don't know. But thank you for your insight there, and I appreciate the conversations. As always, marvelous, Mink. They will need 3 scoring lines to be able to compete with Florida. I agree with that. And everyone's trying to, build the Florida model, I guess. From Don't, any more on the Roslovic rumors? Yes. And we're going to have a video on that tomorrow in terms of specifics. But what I will tell you is I personally think it's odd that he hasn't signed yet. And everyone else does as well. Elliot Friedman, other executives around the league. There's been some rumors. There's been some rumblings. People find it weird that he hasn't signed yet. Is he the option? Is he the fix in the top 6? He wouldn't be mine. Wouldn't be mine. But I find it odd that he hasn't signed yet because a lot of teams would like him. Vancouver's ready to sign him. He hasn't signed. There's rumors, again, out of Vancouver that the Canucks would love that player to play for them. Second line center, by the way, where you get a great opportunity to put up a lot of points. Hasn't signed yet. I think it's weird. The Leafs are waiting to move off some cap. He hasn't signed yet. I wonder if he's a Toronto Maple Leaf. Seems to be some interest there. Oh, and the other update with Roslovic is that he wants to make over $3 million, which for his point production, I'm not so sure about. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out and if he will be a Leaf. But I think it's odd that he hasn't signed yet. I do think it's a little weird. But McMahon, Robertson, and Hildeby for Brian Rust. Brian Rust. I think that there could be a trade in the works with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Just because they have what... I think if you think about it, a lot of people are thinking that Kyle Dubas would want to fleece the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think about it this way. Kyle Dubas really likes specific players. And the Maple Leafs have a lot of them that, he drafted, he was working with. I think you go to Pittsburgh and you go, we want Brian Rust. What do you want? What do you want? Let's start talking about it. Is it Hildeby? Okay. We need a top 6 player. We'll trade you Hildeby. I think Akhtiamov, personally, myself, is the guy anyway, coming through the pipeline. So as long as you can hang on to Akhtiamov, in my eyes, I think that Hildeby can be expendable in that way. So we'll see. Is Domi the answer in the top 6? Is the answer in the room? Does anyone think that the answer is in the room? I'm not so sure. We've seen Robertson on the top line. I've seen Domi on the top line. I didn't mind it. I actually quite liked it. But I think that if you were to have Domi on the third line, that's a pretty good team if you have another top 6 player coming in. So I think that it could work out very nicely for them. I haven't seen much Rust. What are the quality aspects of him? I would liken him to an older Zach Hyman in terms of stylistically, I guess, in terms of like his actual build, what he does. He can go to the net. He's not Zach Hyman. I'm not saying he's Zach Hyman, but similar in that way. Older, go to the net. He put up over 30 goals last season playing with Sidney Crosby on his right wing. So I'm sure he could finish with the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. You don't forget to do that. In 80 games, I believe last season he had 65 points. So that's not bad point production. Again, the goal here is not to replace Mitch Marner. You don't want to replace Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner going out the door and you were to replace Mitch Marner with his clone, that doesn't make the team better. It doesn't make the team better. So if you're going to get a guy that scores less, that's okay as long as he fits stylistically into this team. So I don't mind Brian Rust. We'll see if they can get that done. But Robertson needs to go. He's a pain and is terrible defensively. I wouldn't mind hanging on to Robertson. Right circumstances, we'll have to see. From Darius, do you like Brad's offseason? I think the team got more grit and physicality. Not only did they get more grit and physicality, they got more scoring in the bottom of their lineup. They have a better bottom 6. I mean, if you look at, imagine David Kampf and Calle Jarnkrok are traded, right? What you have left now, you have guys that can play more physical than both of those guys. They can score and are somewhat responsible defensively. David Kampf is like the opposite of Phil Kessel. He's one-dimensional, but only in the defensive zone. And every once in a while, he'll score a goal that makes you go, what? Where was that? But, he's just doesn't offer much offensively. And then Calle Jarnkrok, to me, I know he came off of an injury, but man, that guy was just doing cardio in the playoffs. That guy offered nothing. And I know I said at the time that I liked the fourth line. You have to think about it. Like, with what we had at the time, I was like, okay, they're not getting into trouble. They're not getting scored on. I don't mind this. But if you can have a fourth line that is responsible in their own zone, can pin other teams in their own zone, think of the Florida Panthers, for example, then you're making things happen. But if it's just like, oh, you're just not getting scored on, that's fine. Okay, cool. But are you having any positive impact on the game? I'm not so sure, right? So those two got to go, free up the cap space, and then we'll go from there. But I think this team is way deeper than it was. I feel like for a long time, they haven't had a solidified third line center. They have that now in Nicolas Roy. They have three centers down the middle. Since Nazem Kadri, they have not had like a solidified three-headed monster, if you even want to call it that at this point. But Roy can chip in for some goals. He's responsible defensively. He's won a Stanley Cup. He can play physical. I think that's a win in my eyes. They're deeper that way. Dakota Joshua, I was furious that they didn't sign him last offseason. He re-signed with the Canucks. Just a year later, he's now with the Toronto Maple Leafs. We've seen it. When he's healthy, playing well, and there's been a lot of reports and studies, across the four major sports about what missing training camp does to you. We saw with William Nylander years ago. He was diagnosed with cancer. Dakota Joshua last offseason, he missed training camp. It derailed his season a little bit. He's ready to go this year, and he wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. I'm excited about that. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do. But I really like what Brad's done with this team. How can you not? I think, like, Brad Treliving, has he made some bad moves? Yeah, maybe. Every GM does. You're not going to hit on everything. But for the most part, I am over the moon with what he's done with this team since he took over for Kyle Dubas. Like, this team is way better than it was. It's built more towards what actually wins you a Stanley Cup. Let's be honest. Like, look at the teams winning the Stanley Cup and going to the finals. They're built more in that way. I don't know how you couldn't be happy overall with the product right now on the ice. Obviously, I think Mitch Marner needed to go. Again, just my personal opinion, but I think the Leafs are in a better spot right now. So it'll be interesting to see what they continue to do. Jarnkrok was okay before he got hurt, but when he came back, he was brutal. Yeah, he didn't offer too much. So from don't, with Marner gone, did the Leafs still deploy the 5-forward power play? No. I think it only worked with those 5 forwards. It didn't even work most of the time. Rielly's got to be on the power play now, and that's just the way it'll be. And also, I also found that teams were starting to exploit, especially in the playoffs, the fact that they knew that there was 5 forwards on the ice and there was no defenseman. So if you pressure them, you get them in some trouble. So you need a defenseman back there on the blue line. You do. So go back to that. I don't mind that. Once upon a time, there were still 2 defensemen on the power play. A lot of teams have moved away from that. Some teams, like the Leafs, going to 5 forwards. Nothing wrong with 4 forwards and a defenseman. Do the umbrella. Have a defenseman on the blue line. I think it should be Morgan Rielly. And if he's not performing, then that's fine. Then you look at a different option. So imagine Kadri and Hyman still playing on the Leafs. Yes, there were some mistakes made. That is for sure. I'm a classic. There were some mistakes made at that time. Robertson needs to work on not taking dumb penalties. Then I could see him being useful in the lineup. I agree with that. He did take some untimely penalties, especially in the offensive zone. Max Domi did as well. He needs to clean that up, although I think we all know what we're getting with Max Domi at this point, and I think we're all okay with it. Jarnkrok worth something. He would get grabbed quickly. I think Jarnkrok, him versus David Kampf, Calle Jarnkrok is worth a lot more. I feel like teams would be interested in him. We've seen Calle Jarnkrok play amazing in the top 6, right? So I'm sure some team would be interested. Call Kyle Dubas, see what he wants. Get rid of Kampf and Jarnkrok for either AHL players, or package Nick Robertson for a player like Rust or Raquel, maybe Jason Robertson. That could be interesting as well. We have Robert coming in with another $20. Another super chat in the summer. Your support has been unbelievable, Robert. Not only Robert, but Paul, thank you as well for the super chat. You guys have been around for a long time. You guys have been OGs through all of last season, so appreciate all you guys. But I don't want to, but Danford, Calle Jarnkrok, Hildeby for Luke Evangelista, shore up Nashville's goalies, and get the Leafs a second-line player. To me, I hate throwing this word around. Easton Cowan, Ben Danford are in untouchable territory for me. Unless you're getting a world-eating difference maker, top 6 forward, you do not trade Ben Danford. He's going to be a really good defenseman for this team in the future. I think that they're trying to, he's working with Jake Muzzin as well, who's part of the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. I've seen him scouting games as well in the OHL. I think that, they're working with him. They're trying to make him into the next, Chris Tanev, so he can take over for Chris Tanev when Chris Tanev eventually retires, which is probably coming up in the next couple of years here. So I would not trade Ben Danford. I really wouldn't. But makes some sense there. I also think Nashville has some, they just got Ivan Kovic in the draft. So that's, I think they'll be fine in terms of goaltending. But, I think they got to find a way. Luke Evangelista is a great player, and I think that he would help the Leafs. But to me, you can't touch Ben Danford. You can't, for me. Do you think Nylander will get 100 points? Yes. By the way, everyone forgot. Second in scoring last year. William Nylander. How did we all forget? He was second in scoring. Unbelievable year. I think that he could score 50 goals. The Leafs could have 2 50-goal scorers on the same team. Unbelievable. So, yes, he gets 100 points, 100%. And a lot of people can make the cherry picking, the jokes all you want. He scores a ton of points. One of their best players, shows up when it matters. That's all that matters to me. So, he was great again in the playoffs last year, I thought. So, keep Danford. I agree with that. Jarnkrok is 1 year younger than Tavares. Jarnkrok. Him and I have no appetite to keep either him or Kampf at this point. Absolutely not. Cowan and Danford plus for McTavish. What do you say, Darius? I think I would do one of them for McTavish because McTavish is a difference maker and can play in your second line. So I think I would do one of them and maybe something for McTavish. Both of them would be steep. Both of them would be really steep. I think a lot of people from the outside, if they're not Leaf fans, are really discrediting Easton Cowan and Ben Danford and how good they are. These guys are really good players. Back-to-back OHL finals against each other. They're really good players, and I think they're going to be good NHL players as well. Danford's not going to be like this crazy offensive defenseman or anything like that, but he does the little things, the detailed things on the defensive side of the puck that can win you hockey games. So maybe I would look at doing one of them, but we'll see. I'm sure Chicago would like Kampf. I think Brad Shalivin's got to start calling up a bunch of teams at this point. Get things rolling here. I wanted to bring up some other stuff about heading into next season as well. Austin Matthews is 20 goals away from passing Matt Sundin for most goals in Leafs history. He's going to do that this year. Not only is he going to do that this year, he might do that before 2026. And when I say he might, if he's healthy, he might do that in November. That might be a stretch, but like December, that he could be the Leafs' all-time leading goal scorer. So pretty cool. No current NHL player holds the all-time goals or points record for any original six team, but Matthews has the chance to change that this season. And if Matthews is a Leaf well into his 30s, he could set the bar incredibly high at the rate he's going. Think about that. Matt Sundin in 2008, I believe, set that record, and Austin Matthews is 20 goals away from breaking it, and he's 27 years old. He's about to be 28 years old. It's just a remarkable player. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, we talked about Morgan Rielly, and we know what's up with the cap. I'll leave this up for now just for the sake of conversation in the chat, because I know a lot of people are talking about cap hits and all that stuff. But JT was 7th in goals last year. A lot of people forget about that as well. He was fantastic. He almost scored 40 goals. JT is severely underrated around the league now. So he's fantastic. There's a reason I have his jersey behind me. So also because he's Portuguese. But these chats would be pointless if Marner would agree to move to Carolina and we would have had Mikko Rantanen. It would have been nice. I think we got to put that to bed. Marner in his contract. He signed the contract. He earned the right to that no movement clause. The Leafs should have traded him 2 years ago when they could have. Unfortunately, the blame for that one specifically does have to fall on the previous regime. It does, and including Brendan Shanahan. So, also, Brendan Shanahan, I thought this was interesting. I got reminded of this today, is included in the Amazon documentary coming out for this year, NHL Face-Off. He's one of the cast members, if you want to call it that, like one of the people that they followed around during the season. That is going to be an interesting watch. Very excited to watch that one. So, Did the Leafs beat the Panthers last season with McDavid instead of Marner? If the salary cap didn't exist, listen, I'm going to go full fantasy mode here. If the salary cap didn't exist and the Leafs had Connor McDavid instead of Mitch Marner, they would have won the Stanley Cup last year. Connor McDavid, on paper, the Leafs are a far better team on paper than the Edmonton Oilers. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl will that team to win by sheer will. Like, has nothing to do with anything. Their leadership, they will that team to win. It is not as skilled as this Toronto Maple Leafs team. But like Craig Berube said, with this Toronto Maple Leafs team, it is between the years. So if they had Connor McDavid, I think they would have won the cup. But again, salary cap matters, and Connor McDavid is not a Toronto Maple Leaf, unfortunately. But Marner for cap space wasn't a bad trade. That's essentially what they got with that trade. Kevin Weeks have also linked the Leafs to Tyler Toffoli. I wouldn't hate that one as well, although I do think he makes $6 million. They can make that work. They've traded with the San Jose Sharks in the past. That could make a lot of sense, excuse me. So I don't mind that one. Tyler Toffoli, that's an interesting one. A lot of people working the phones during the summer as well. Darius, what do you think is the most realistic top six you think the Leafs will get? Realistic, I think they're definitely calling Pittsburgh and seeing what's up there. Listen, like, if you look around the league, this is the thing. You could just go, hey, the Leafs got to make a trade. Cool. Let's look around the league and who would make sense, right? Not every team wants to trade their top six players. So when you're talking about realistically, to me, the only team in the entire league that's selling is the Pittsburgh Penguins. So you know you can go to them. But then you're trading with Kyle Dubas, and that can get scary because he knows the organization and some of the prospects very well within the Leafs organization. So you might want something that you don't want to give up, right? So to me, it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's Brian Russ, Rickard Rakell, one of those guys. And I think that things could get very interesting because the way I see it right now, Michelli's on the top line. But it really depends on who they go out and get as that extra top six players. So to me, if you go out and get like a Brian Rust, he goes on the top line, and then you put Michelli on the second line with Tavares and Nylander, that could be crazy because we know Nylander can score. He's an underrated playmaker as well. But if you have Michelli dishing him the puck and Tavares is just there in front doing his thing, that could be a really, really good line as well. I do like Tyler Toffoli a lot. That could make a lot of sense, I think, but obviously he makes more money. So you have to consider these things, and age, of course. Brian Russ is a little bit older, so you have to consider some of these things as well. So, gotta take it all into account. Robert with another $5 donation. Thank you so much for another super chat. Fine then, trade Nicolas Waugh for Mitch Marner. Ha ha ha. Just kidding. Keeping things light. Gotta go eat some supper. Leafs Digest rules. Thank you, Robert. Your support has been unbelievable all season. We appreciate the support, and you've been here since the beginning at this point. So really looking forward to seeing you in the chats as we head forward to the season, and obviously we'll be doing our regular, post-game stuff once the season gets kicked off and all that fun stuff. But I wonder, would you do that trade if you were Vegas? Nicolas Waugh for Mitch Marner. That'd be an interesting one, but that could be interesting. Do you think Stolarz will be as good as he was last year after his injury? Yeah, absolutely. Stolarz is going to be... there are some training videos of Anthony Stolarz from this summer. That man wants to win a Stanley Cup. That man means business. I'm very excited to see what he's going to be able to do. He's trying to work on his, which is insane to say because his agility and athleticism for his size is already insane. He's working on both those things this summer. He's gonna be awesome this year. I can't wait to watch him play again. He's definitely gonna be the starter, but I feel like long term they're trying to kind of bring up Joseph Woll into that spot. So we'll see how that continues. But I'm excited to see what he does this year because he's gonna be great again. From Eric Darius, you might not like this, but to help improve my top six, I would trade Wall and extend Stolarz. Even Carlo, I'd trade. Myers did well with Rielly. I don't think Myers is the answer long term, and in terms of giving him a bigger role and obviously more games played. I think it's an interesting idea. I don't hate trading Joseph Woll. If it makes the team better, you got to look at it. You have your starting goaltender in obviously Anthony Stolarz, but Carlo, I don't think it's off the table either. It just has to make sense and it has to make the team better. So that could make a lot of sense. I do like the Tippett idea. Speed on the second line. Yeah, he's quick. He's physical. He can score goals. I think that'd be great. I think that Owen Tippett, in the right circumstance on the right team, could score 40 goals in the NHL. So, you know, that could make a lot of sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Raquel hits a lot. Yeah, I'm just a little, I don't know. I feel kind of weirdly about Rickard Raquel. Best season of his career last year. You know, does it get any better? He's in his 30s. Could be interesting. Of course, he's played on some really bad teams, right? Like when he was with the Ducks, they weren't great. And then obviously the Penguins are not great. So I have to keep that in mind as well. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think we'll wrap it up there, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get some last questions in here. Right before we wrap up, send those in the chat, and I'll be sure to get to them right before we wrap up here. But, you know, lots of updates, a lot of Nick Robertson stuff, of course, right now. What's going to happen with the rest of the lineup? We're going to have videos tomorrow. We're going to have videos Friday. We're going to have videos Saturday, Sunday, all through the summer. We're going to have videos because there's some more updates coming out. We got some new stuff from Friedman today that we're going to be covering, and a interesting Jack Roslovic update that you're going to want to stay tuned for tomorrow, because I think it's very odd that he hasn't signed yet, and I do think it has something to do with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So stay tuned for that tomorrow, but could be interesting. And I wonder if they look at some more trades outside of freeing up space for obviously a top 6 forward, that they have to be sure that they can get one before they trade Calle, Jarnkrok, and David Kampf. Not even, though. You could still free up that salary cap space if you want. But appreciate it, Paul. Appreciate it for tuning in. I do agree with you that Treliving has been pretty good so far. Do we not try to get a higher cap hit forward to open the door for McDavid? I don't know. If you're any team around the league, unless you're like, I don't know, Anaheim, like I don't think you can leave stuff up to chance like that. Because what if McDavid signs at the 11th hour with the Edmonton Oilers? Then you're toast. You're finished. You're cooked. It could be interesting, but we will see you guys for another video tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you to everyone who donated, Paul included. Appreciate that. And, of course, Robert. Appreciate all the support, everyone. We will see you in a video tomorrow. Videos every day until the season starts, and we are only a month away from the start of the preseason, 2 months away from the start of the season, and I would assume maybe a week, maybe a couple days away from a pretty significant trade. By all accounts, from Elliot Friedman, Toronto Maple Leafs, this is not the roster they're going into the season with. Martin Necas could be an interesting one. We're going to have a lot of videos on all this stuff. Appreciate the support, everybody. We will see you for another video tomorrow.
Stories of the bold, where legends are told, from first pop drop to the season's full. Tune in and watch the drama unfold.